No one is safe. That is a direct quote from Bungie staff. Bungie management face an existential threat, one that could be the reason behind every mercenary decision, every desperate decision we have seen from the company this year, because we may now have an idea of exactly what is driving the monetization decisions that they're making, like the $15 starter set that was essentially preying on new players not understanding its contents, or the layoffs to their longer-term staff. IGN sources tell them that if Bungie fails to meet certain financial targets, then there will be severe consequences. In their words, if Bungie falls short of certain financial thresholds by too great an amount, Sony is allowed to dissolve the board and take full control of the company. Right, here's the deal, everybody. So, this all comes from a great piece from IGN, and actually credit to the IGN news team. They have broke quite a few pretty damn good stories of actual journalism lately. This is from Rebecca Valentine of their news team, who's been killing it this year. Spoke to multiple Bungie staff in the wake of the layoffs earlier this year. And suffice to say, when you treat your staff the way Bungie appear to have treated their staff, well, the ship is going to be leaky. It's just like how whenever things went rather bad with Creative Assembly, guess what happened? People arrived in my email inbox because they had a story to share. Okay. The state of management then. The big ticket item here, as you heard in the beginning, is Sony actually is able to dissolve the board and take full control of the company. Now, remember all those layoffs that happened earlier this year. Just so that you're up to date, those happened in the wake of Bungie falling short of their revenue targets by 45% for the fiscal year. Now, to be clear, that is an absolute goddamn disaster. If it was 45% of a profit target, well, that number could be quite a bit smaller, but hey, maybe it's still profit, whatever. Now, obviously, we do not know their profit loss, but revenue, that is the amount of money you are getting in. That is the most serious. So, deeply bad. And the reasons why, I think we all know that they are completely obvious. Now, at the time, this was bad news. This reflected a downturn in interest in the game following the very poorly received Lightfall expansion and a rebuke of the very hard monetization that they had been driving from the player base. It is monetization that, frankly, if you are playing World of Warcraft or you're playing Overwatch or you're playing some other sort of game where, it's annoying, but you do kind of grin and bear through it because the core game you're still finding fun. Take a look at Destiny 2, because that is an example of all of those things going far more mercenary and them trying to get as much free to play because, hey, at least with Overwatch, you can log into that thing for free. And while you technically can do that with Destiny 2, we all know that its free-to-play experience is essentially a complete joke. So they have pretty much used the free-to-play technicality to go full mercenary with their monetization, even though every single player of that game knows that it is a pretty damn significant investment if you actually want to play properly. And even when you do that, because of how the cosmetics are done, you are not getting what feels like a premium a la carte experience in a game that is expensive. As I'm sure you can all sort of understand, be it us using a shrinkflation analogy or, just trying to put the pulp back in the juicer to get the last drop of juice, that is what they have been doing from their player base. So, it was pretty gross. It was mercenary for them to fire long-term staff, like, 20-year veteran composers who define the sound of their game to reduce their overheads, right? That's mercenary, that's brutal. But now we understand there's another factor to this. Management keeping their damn jobs. You see, in everything that Bobby Kotick did over with Activision Blizzard, we all knew that, yes, even if he doesn't end up staying at the company, he does get a big golden parachute full of money, made of money, with ropes, made of money, everything money, gold-plated. Here could be different. The article describes the current board of Bungie being split between Sony staff and Bungie staff, with CEO Pete Parsons as the tiebreaker vote. That is a structure designed to cause chaos and strife. I have absolutely no idea why they thought that was a good way to structure the deal. Frankly, this seems like either people who agreed to this deal got a very handsome amount of money to sign on to a bad deal, or Sony just, quite frankly, flexing some sort of power play here, because that's quite crazy. Now, that being said, while this is a position with their board that I think fundamentally, I mean, Sony owns them, they do actually have they have all the cards. For an acquisition, this technically is a fairly generous deal, but obviously this generosity, the fact that the board does get to be there and that Bungie still has quite a bit of power in the equation, versus, say, perhaps you could imagine the power that a Naughty Dog would have or something like that. But here's what is from Rebecca's article. Sources say they were told by leaders that the current split board structure is contingent on Bungie meeting certain financial goals. If Bungie falls short of certain thresholds by too great an amount, Sony is allowed to dissolve the existing board and take full control of the company. And the sources went on to suggest to Rebecca that the final shape, which is the next expansion and basically the end of the whole darkness versus light saga, that is now being delayed out of the financial year, and that with no other revenue streams such as Marathon, there is a limited opportunity to course correct otherwise. Now, to me, this is something that is quite fascinating. Personally, and running a company, dealing with cash flow with even our development studio, one of the things that's interesting to me is when things are about scheduling, right? Could it be that unfortunate scheduling could give Bungie short-term bad numbers that would then allow Sony, by the terms of their deal, to pounce in and make their move, right? One maybe has to wonder if that's actually something that could happen here. I think one of the main points, though, is that this sets a lot of very rough incentives. We all see that what's happening with Destiny 2 right now is bad for that game's long-term health. It is bad for that game's community. Look at the amount of goodwill that, as Datto put at the end of his video, basically the amount of goodwill they were willing to throw into the bin in return for a few grand. Because I think we all know that starter pack really did not make that much sense, and there's just about no way that really would have been generating that much revenue anyway. So the question for Sony then is, if that threshold is met, do they actually choose to pull the trigger? Because they could give Bungie a little bit more latitude to operate further. That could be good, especially if they don't want to have the hassle, of running Bungie, which I imagine would be quite a headache. Now, Sony themselves have been very specifically instituting 10% cuts across many of their subsidiary developers, so taking on more expenses may not be the goal there. And do remember those job losses at Bungie, they were quite firmly being positioned as a Bungie thing at the time, even of course amidst Sony having layoffs and cost controls as well. Or Sony could just pull the gun that they have pointed at Bungie's head and take over, make all those decisions themselves. And with that, we have to pick what is better for the staff and also for the audience, because right now, this situation where Bungie is being ran by their CEO and his board, obviously audiences are not being served by that decision-making. Staff do not seem to be served by that decision-making, and perhaps Sony would have made different decisions had they have known that Lightfall would be such a miss. And just to color it, here's a quote again from Rebecca's article. Employees in one department recalled a post-layoffs Q&A session where a department head was asked if leadership would be taking salary cuts. A little bit of context there. Obviously, over at Nintendo, we all know the story of the C-suite actually taking cuts when times were bad. So with that being the obvious point of comparison, precisely the way that you do that and take accountability as a leader, well, Bungie responded by saying they're not that type of company. So if they're not the type of company where management, as in full top management, are going to be taking pay cuts, because the thing is, even if their pay cuts wouldn't materially impact the situation, that's not the goddamn point. The point is that you then are leading from the front, that you are also feeling the pain with your staff. So obviously, with the context of them saying, oh, we're not that type of company where, leadership takes accountability, what a ridiculous concept. They're not that type of company. And evidently, as evidenced by this entire situation, they're quite clearly a company where the C-suite will make mercenary decisions in order to save their own asses. Now, let's get into the state of the company, again, per IGN sources here. Here are just a few items in the grand list of things that Bungie has cut from staff, and many of these are IGN sources corroborating the reporting from Bloomberg. A studio-wide hiring freeze. Again, if you're playing Bungie games, you're playing Destiny 2, you're kind of wondering, is the content a bit light? Is too much stuff, reused? Am I getting good bang for my buck? While you're also seeing development work going into Marathon. Obviously, a hiring freeze, when you're feeling the pinch of their not being enough content, that's bad. Reduced travel budgets, elimination of holiday bonuses, and performance bonuses will only be the 80% minimum they're obligated to meet. A delay to their yearly pentathlon, which is basically a sports day that they do going back to 1999, the peer recognition program, employee compensation adjustments to match market rates. These are all things that these teams had and now do not have. Thing is, though, it's likely going to get worse because Bungie management seem to be rather openly talking about what could happen. I'll just go again into some quoting here. Several people we spoke to told us that leaders had reiterated across multiple meetings that they couldn't guarantee there wouldn't be more layoffs, with two specifically recalling Chief People Officer Holly outright stating layoffs were a lever the company would pull again. Quote, "We know we need Final Shape to do well," one source told IGN, "and the feeling at the studio is, if it doesn't, we are definitely looking at more layoffs." To many, that will be stating the obvious, right? If they are down 45% on their projections and then the next expansion is also rough, yes, obviously, that is a lever that will need to be pulled. Now, the thing here is interesting because obviously layoffs are a lever that can be pulled. What Holly, their Chief People Officer, is saying here is, in a way, you could say, honest. It's honest and demotivating. And in terms of motivating your team to do excellent work, there is a fine line because you do have a real, yes, duty of care, responsibility to your people. So you do need to be realistic about the prospects that you face. But on the other hand, if you then are trying to use this as a motivational tool by threatening people, well, that is not how you are going to have good incentives within your company. People need to be inspired, right? They don't need to be basically whipped with threats. When you're openly telling people that they either make management's plan work or there will be layoffs, that is a threat. That is one of the worst ways to deal with things. And this is where it gets particularly worse, something that is a lot more egregious when it's management not listening to staff and that causing the issues. How many times does it feel like out of touch morons? And it's funny because the video I'm thinking about is from Bain & Co. Of course, Bain, McKinsey, those are up with some of those big consultancy firms. We can talk about consultancy, but there is a particularly good video from Bain & Co. about the problem as companies scale that basically can be defined as distance from the front line. Distance from, say, their frontline staff. That's why if you're the CEO, you should probably hop in customer support for a few hours a month so you actually understand what's going on. You should probably spend time in and around your QA department so you actually know what's going on. Now, because a Ridley Scott movie that's not particularly good happens to have this just being a common analogy, one thing that a lot of people may not know about the Battle of Waterloo and some of the very effective leadership from Wellington is that it is essentially a miracle that he survived that battle, and many of his top staff around him didn't, because he was spending so much time riding to where the fighting was the thickest and where basically the people needed him to be present so the morale would not collapse, of course, so that that side could last for long enough for reinforcements to come. We all know how Waterloo ends. Point being there, that's an example of true leadership. What we're seeing here is not true leadership. And it's why that Bain & Co. analogy, about being close to your frontline staff, it conjures up in those sort of military analogies the general who is back at headquarters, not really understanding what's going on in the front, therefore making terrible and costly decisions. And while yes, video games are nowhere near as serious as very serious things like that, there are important lessons that we can learn. And frankly, if some of the worst of what humanity gets up to can actually produce some valid leadership lessons. I think the least that we should do is try to learn from the the sacrifice and I suppose the history that has been written by those who have came before us, which is why to me this is offensively bad leadership, and that is obviously something I care a lot about. Yes, our team's like 15 people, obviously different here, but still a lot of the fundamentals of leadership, they are the same everywhere. This is the worst. This is the worst. And I truly hate it. I truly hate and despise it. So per IGN's previous reporting before this, staff who they'd spoken to had basically said of continually flagging problems to management and management not listening. Staff telling management, hey boss, this plan will not work. We know what the community wants. A lot of the developers understand what the community needs, and they're not being given the support to actually fix the real problems. And that brings us back to those original layoffs. Bungie's decision-making takes on, I think, a very different tone under these circumstances, with the obvious sort of thing here where the C-suite said, we're not the sort of company where we, the leaders, will take any hit. We will expand all of you resource people, but we're going to be fine. Of course, if they think like that, they're not going to listen to and value their staff. And of course, they are going to make mercenary decisions in a buffoonish last-ditch attempt to save their own asses, because the 45% decrease in revenue, frankly, is their own goddamn fault. Another example of this that happened in another company where recently, and it's what I would say, if you are in Bungie and you want to talk or, drop email, I'm getting our head writer, Connor, linked up on our tips email, because my inbox has been absolutely rammed. Please reach out to us if you have any color, anything that you want to add to a story like this. Obviously, any information that I do we do decide to disperse, we will take into account, your wishes, safety, etc., and, do it properly and professionally. A number of people with the recent Creative Assembly story reached out to us, and, with that, we were able to meaningfully add to the conversation, such as a lot of the problems that led to Warhammer 3 having a very bad launch. Yet another example of staff actually working in the game, knowing what the game needs, and trying to report it up the chain, saying these are going to be future problems. Guess what? All those problems happen because upper levels do not listen and do not change plans. So, staff and ex-staff have been reacting to this on X. And here is the ex-publishing producer / live event manager being responded to by an ex-community manager. Posted without comment, but a long look to camera, quoting the IGN reporting that, of course, we are discussing today. And of course, the eminently gifable Michael Scott from Liana here, who was a community manager. And the thing with community managers, and it's definitely my experience having just throughout my years in the industry, seeing loads of community managers, hanging out with them, they are not allowed, they cannot say certain things. Players get quite angry with them, maybe come up with some conspiracy theories or whatever. In all of the examples that I have seen, the community managers know exactly what is going on, and the companies would do well to listen to their community managers, because their community managers, again, talking to the sort of frontline staff, actually knowing what's going on at the front, they actually know what's going on. They have a unique insight that management, who are shielded from that by layers of process and layers of, management and management and management and management all the way down. The people at the front line, who may be some of your most junior employees, they know. A good example all companies should look to is Kaizen, from Toyota, where in Toyota, everyone is encouraged to report problems, suggestions, and fixes up the chain, from somebody working on the production line to their manager to everything, and it is actively coached all levels of the company. It's one of the ways that Toyota has been able to be, a company that makes so many goddamn cars so efficiently. Within video games, though, we are, as an industry, woefully bad at this shit. And I think what's happening is that a lot of developers have known this for a long time, but it's only now that a lot of customers are actually beginning to appreciate this. Because back in the day when we just, you buy a game, you play the game, that's it. But now that the business models of the games are becoming so much more fundamentally extractive of your time, your attention, and your wallet, you are being squeezed harder. That means you're a lot more aware that you're being squeezed, and that means you're not going to take shit. And we're all beginning to notice the thing run aground. Here's a criticism passed on from a person currently at the company to IGN. I'm angry, I'm upset. This isn't what I came here to do, one person says. It feels like many higher-ups aren't listening to the data. The data that, of course, is bad. We just need to win our fans back. They still like us. No, they don't. We got rid of some of our most knowledgeable, beloved folks who have been here 20 plus years. Every day I walk in, I'm afraid I or my friends are next. No one is safe. And within that are so many problems. If you are a player of this game and you feel like your feedback has been ignored, well, quite evidently, it hasn't been ignored by the people who are making the game. They're not allowed to do anything to fix it because the boneheaded morons in management have that old rockstar dev mentality. It is something we saw with Blizzard Entertainment, something, and I do appreciate the candor from the current game director of World of Warcraft in his recent interview with Preach conducted in BlizzCon, saying, basically, we got a lot of things wrong. We were really stubborn, and we had stubborn, outdated sort of mental models of how game development works, where, you know, we're the developers, we kind of know what's best. And he basically said, that was wrong, and that is why we made mistakes. The learning actually happened. The problem here, though, is the learning happening too late for players of Destiny, who absolutely deserve better and have put up with so much. And of course, if you have just deleted your institutional knowledge because you have gotten rid of some of your most experienced, tenured staff who know everything like the back of their hand, well, what's that going to do to the confidence of the people who are perhaps a bit more new at the company? You know, their leaders, who are the people who are coaching them, mentoring them, they're ideally their champions who raise them up, they are now gone. You can see how this is a recipe for the final shape not being a game that meets the company's goals. But when management views developers as, you know, just sort of game development meat, this is exactly the sort of thing that happens. And this mercenary decision-making also sheds light on some interesting things from the past, because in 2021, Bungie explicitly acknowledged how poorly they had treated staff in the past, how they failed to make them feel like this could be a place for talented and creative people at Bungie to thrive and do their best work, and all of that bullshit. Which, here's the thing, a lot of people at the time, you know, well-meaning people, who obviously will agree with all of that and will be very much more on the sort of the very progressive, to the point where they could perhaps be exploited and, you know, their good intentions could be exploited and manipulated by mercenary individuals operating under bad incentives. So, you know, they farmed all the wins, all the love, all the hearts from that. And maybe those amongst us who are more skeptical of that, you know, skeptical of the company saying, oh, all the good things, thrive, best work, create, respect everyone, woo, happy. And you may be thinking, this all sounds like a load of bollocks, and I don't think you people can be trusted. The problem here is that this then damages every other company who is saying they're trying to do the good thing and is actually trying to do the good thing, because it just creates a miasma of distrust that is bad for the entire industry. As an example, whenever Blizzard was going through a very high period of staff attrition, for obvious reasons, and when there was a drama around enforced, like returning to office in a way that didn't suit all staff, you know, the sort of, you know, Lord Vader, you know, pray I don't change the terms of the deal any further. Bungie people, you know, recruiters, were all tweeting, come to Bungie, we're great. And that all feels hollow and mercenary now. So if there was a glimmer of maybe hope in your heart, well, congratulations, management at Bungie. That's something that's just been killed. To continue, they, brackets QA workers, also perceive growing hostility from the team and company leadership, including a meeting in which QA was said to be referred to as non-developers by leadership. In total, sources tell us over 10% of Bungie's internal QA department was either fired or laid off between early October and early November, including both reported and departures leading up to that reported layoff wave. QA is treated awfully. If you don't like bugs in your game, Normally, QA's actually found the bugs, but the developers haven't been afforded enough time to fix it, or QA has been understaffed. I will give you one ghoulish example that I cannot, it's things that have been leaked to me, but I know 100% that they are true. Obviously, in the case like this, you have to be sensitive to, people's security concerns, etc. I do know a situation at a major publisher in, a sort of business meeting. It was an all-day thing, all of the key stakeholders within the company being there, and, a sort of expensive, more fancy dinner, when everyone's like, yes, we've completed our thing, everybody. One of those happens. And everyone in the room goes there, except for the representatives from QA. Suffice to say, that was quite bad for morale. I run a company. I do, in fact, engage in the whatever flawed economic system that we're in. I'm not naturally a, eat the rich. But here's the deal. If you want people to start saying eat the rich, treat your QA staff like that, and you will make yourself the enemy, the villain that so many people desperately want to tear open with their very teeth. And that is why bad management like this, that quite frankly erodes the glue that holds industry and society together, that is why it infuriates me, because it actually does matter. And perhaps in a world where it's all about, hey, let's make Halo. Oh, wow, Halo was real good. Let's try to make another Halo. Oh, look, it was real good. Maybe incentives were a little bit more aligned. And I'm sure those were the old days where there was a lot of banditry, a lot of crazy stuff going on, young, immature industry, full of people way promoted out of competence because it's a young industry and just about nobody in it has got a good level of institutional, knowledge. There's not mentors from prior generations who can train new leaders because it's a new industry. But you do have to wonder now that the live service model comes, and as we like to say in this channel, line go up, as line go up sort of takes point. Because there's different types of line go up. In a way, right now, I'm in a little bit of a line go up with what we're doing because I want to be able to, as an example, increase employee compensation and things like that, and get people better things around the office. So again, trying to get more profit is not a bad thing. The problem is when it is done in this mercenary and degenerate way that is basically just at the expense of people and at the expense of your own future just to get the good thing now, to jump through some stupid hoop that anybody with a 5 to 10 year view knows is stupid. That is when things just become so, like almost Kafkaesque, preposterous bollocks that people, there's such a lack of hope because it makes so little sense. And that is why people get desperate. And that is why things turn vicious. And if leaders in the industry want to know why it feels like a shit show, want to know why, as a point of policy, players just trust by default less, these are the reasons why. So what'll happen then? Will the management get the sack? Will Sony just swoop in? I don't know. It's impossible to call the shot of whether either of those, which one will be a better outcome. What I do know is if you're a Destiny player, all of this really is quite rough. And knowing what's up at Bungie, knowing that the frontline staff, broadly speaking, know what's up, and that the likes of that stupid starter pack were rammed through them, it doesn't bode well, does it? And even thinking about the final shape, a very curious thing that many people noticed in the Destiny community, there was the sort of launch trailer for Lightfall. And, from my perspective, I had heard, and hey, here's a potential user story, because actually I was ready to purchase Lightfall. The reason why is I like Skill Up. He's one of the reviewers I don't always actually agree with him, but the point is I respect him and I understand where he comes from. I feel like I've got a pretty good read on his preferences. So it actually means whether he likes something or doesn't like something, whether I agree or disagree, I always get useful information. That's what's great about a more one-on-one reviewer relationship. That's why it's great that Austin is doing more content on that channel as well. Because of what he was saying about Destiny, I was ready to give them a full big shot because I just heard Witch Queen was so good. And then I saw the trailer. And as much as some of the dialogue was maybe, little bit cringe because I don't know what it is about games writing, but we really do like just bombarding players with proper nouns spoken very slowly in a way that just doesn't feel right. But hey, the triangle, the fleet of triangles are coming from the circle, and circles are friendly, so we need to defend the circle. But what if the circle actually operates more like a square. I don't know. It was enough that you kind of thought, okay, this is kind of cool. It's a big space battle, and Bungie's pretty damn good at their visual language. But people kind of noticed the sort of cinematic that plays at the very end of Lightfall does just sort of feel like it was the other half of that first cinematic. And then people kind of noticed that Lightfall did a really bad job of answering questions that it raised. And that even though it was called Lightfall, it did seem like a bizarre, meandering, like, not the point at all of what people were excited by. I mean, come on, they call it Lightfall, and then they ship what they shipped? Insanity. So it's almost as if, and I think the prevailing opinion from people is that Lightfall basically was a filler expansion, you know? Just all of that makes me severely worried. And it's such a shame, because Witch Queen proves that goddamn, somehow, whenever the stars align, that team can make really great stuff. And as somebody for whom, Halo 2, Halo 3 were formative experiences in growing up as a person who loves video games, the idea that Bungie are back firing on all cylinders, doing really good narrative content that people are gripped by, along with their, I would say, in many cases, industry-leading visual design, as is present in Destiny, I was so ready to drop the cash and get into that game. I didn't come back. You know, I bought Destiny 2, bought 1 or 2 of its seasons. There's no way I'm coming back for this shit. How many other people are like that? Have they focused so much on squeezing every goddamn little dollar they can out of the current player base that they've entirely forgot that me, and perhaps statistically, likely you, that both of us are probably people who could have been turned into active players again. But through all of their short-term mercenary decision-making, we have been put off and we have not came back. And maybe now they're wondering, oh, why is our revenue 45% below expectations? What a pack of scumbags. That is it for today's story. If you are a current or former Bungie employee, you can reach out. tips@bellular.games is the email address. We will put it in the screen. We can talk, obviously at we do game development stuff at a very different level, but, we have shipped a video game. There's some bits that, we do understand that we can get. We have had, bugs happen that we've had to, go and firefight and all of that stuff. So I'd like to think that if you did want to share a story in a way, we'd be fairly well positioned to communicate things in a way where you wouldn't feel exploited, because I know journalism is a sword that can cut with both edges. And sometimes people feel, I know that maybe, you know what I mean. Something I hear from devs quite a lot of the time, actually, in conferences and stuff. I can guarantee our goal is not to do that. Our goal is to share your story for the betterment of the industry, and that only. So that is the deal. That is the situation. Thank you for tuning in this admittedly quite long video, but to be honest, when companies are doing things like this, I think we need to talk about it seriously, because this is what is burning staff out of our industry. It is what is burning players from our industry. It is the worst of the worst, so it should be fought hard. That's it for today. Thank you for stopping by. Let me know what your perspective is. I'll see you in the next video.